I'd like to invite to the podium our first moderator of the afternoon, Chris Desai, who will sit with panelists Tariq Brown, Memphis Ayowade, Shara Beckley, and Kiki Oniwinde. First, allow me to tell you a little bit about our esteemed moderator, Chris, for those minute number of you who don't know him. Chris is a world-renowned entrepreneur, philanthropist from humble beginnings in Leicester, who has made considerable contributions to the United Kingdom and beyond with his organic luxury fashion brand, Vayu, his registered charity, the Vayu Foundation, and his 2 global projects, UOCEAN 2050 and UEARTH 2050. Chris, being mixed race, with his upbringing stemming from Africa, India, and the Caribbean, strives to work with isolated and underserved communities daily. Chris's accolades include being voted in the 40 Under 40 Awards for Climate and Sustainability, being a BBC winner of the Make a Difference Awards, and many more. Join me in welcoming Chris to the podium, where he will introduce his guests and engage us in an insightful discussion on building tomorrow's leaders today. Chris, please come.
Well, I've got the graveyard shift, and that always means after everyone's eaten. So I've got to wake everyone up today. Thank you so much for that very, very kind introduction. It's an honor to welcome you to this panel. It's called Future, Building Tomorrow's Leaders Today, exploring every impact now for tomorrow. Across the African and Caribbean diaspora, we stand at a pivotal moment, I believe, one that calls us to reimagine leadership from the traditional models, and especially through the lenses of legacy, equity, and empowerment. The young people we nurture today will define the next era across our nations, communities, and industries. So without further ado, I would like to make this all about my amazing panelists, which I'm honored to have. Can I have to the stage Shara Beckley? Round of applause. Do you want to sit at the end? Yeah. Shara, a distinguished powerhouse who bridges the corporate and voluntary worlds. That's what I really loved about her, actually, that it's not just community, it's not just corporates, it's that bridge, which makes her actually have an outstanding point of view of the world, helping to make sustainability in carbon markets more transparent, investable, and especially inclusive. Next guest, Memphis Ayowade. Round of applause. Memphis is an educator, author, and community leader, working with young people, schools, and social enterprises, which is a big part of my heart, to inspire purpose and leadership at every level. Next to the stage, you all know her, she's literally famous in this room, Grace Munyeri, to the stage. I don't even think I need to read her title. She speaks for herself. A non-profit founder and advocate empowering young African girls through education, mentorship, while driving accountability with structure in the tech and data sector. Oh, 2 rounds of applause for Grace. Maya, you already got this. And then we've got Tariq Brown. Round of applause. Can you come to the stage, please? Tariq is the founder of a CIC called House of Vox, facilitator, poet, and public speaker with experience in youth development, career programming, and community engagement. And that's why this panel is going to be absolutely phenomenal, because we've got a legacy of different people here. Quick thing. Michael, is Michael part of this today? No, we don't need it? Okay, that's fine. So, together they represent an ecosystem that shapes future leadership, business, community, and education alike. Let's explore how we can act today to build a future where every young person, regardless of background, has the power to perform and lead. So, without further ado, welcome to the stage. If you want to grab a microphone, that might be good. I'm just going to jump into it. Shara, for yourself, You've worked across both the corporate and voluntary sectors, which I think really gives you a specific point of view. A lot of the times when we hear from corporates, they have no understanding of on-the-ground work in communities. And when you hear from the voluntary sector, they have no understand how you make something traceable, investable, when you're talking about capital and things like that. So what lessons can be shared between the voluntary and the corporate sector to specifically make carbon offsets and community-led initiatives more investable, transparent, and impactful? Because that's the only way that we're going to drive big finance into Africa. Is the mic on? We'll check your microphones as well. There you go.
It's working. Thank you very much, Chris. I think the first point is really around education, to get us all on the same page. And just to level set, how many people know about the voluntary carbon market? Perfect. So what I say is going to be new and interesting. One quick stat to start. So Eco Marketplace last year looked at some analysis, and in 2024, the amount of finance that went into Africa from the voluntary carbon market, about 13 million carbon credits. That's the amount of sort of carbon sequestered from the atmosphere. That raised about $80 million channeled to Africa. The Africa Carbon Markets Initiative has an ambition to get to $6 billion USD per year by 2030. i.e., there's a real opportunity via the voluntary carbon markets to channel finance to drive transformational change. Right now, there's a developmental study that shows that about only 2% is being untapped with regards to estimated carbon credits. And like, what are these carbon credits? Really, it's about change on the ground. We can use clean cooking, for example. I know there's so many stats here, and we're all working either in development or investment, but it's about changing lives. The Clean Cooking Alliance did some analysis, and we know it's about 1 in 3 people globally still live with sort of indoor air cooking. So whether that's fired by firewood, indoor, it's causing about 3 million deaths per year. That is more than malaria, diarrhea, and tuberculosis combined. And my organization, Climate Impact Partners, we've been in the voluntary carbon market for about 2 decades. And way back, we set the first methodology in Bangladesh to measure the amount of carbon that is being calculated for shifting from indoor air cooking so that companies could fund the scalability of some of these projects. And that's what it's really about. It's about transformational change and mind shift. If, going to get firewood is quicker, but it's actually causing so many deaths, there is an alternative route. And there's an alternative route that makes economic sense. And I think that's the link and the shift. There's another project in Zambia, which is more focused on reforestation and working with farmers on the ground. The voluntary carbon market is an example project, actually, because it sets a clear structure on a shared funding model, where 60% of the finance goes directly to farmers, and then at least 70% of all the money that is being funded by corporates anywhere around the world, that's staying within Zambia. And there's very clear and transparent models, and that's where we need to get to so that everyone understands, unless it makes good business sense, we're not going to shift what we're doing. We're not going to, change from burning in fossil fuels internally.
Thank you for that. And that sort of leads me on to my next question. Memphis, this is for yourself. Yourself, right, have had your own CIC, I believe, for over 4 years. So how can, say, a social enterprise inspire young people, whether it's here or in Africa, to actually come up with solutions, right? Because a lot of the times, I tell my mom, stop using Bluetooth headphones because it's frying your brain. And she's like, oh, that's not a real thing, right? Speak to a young person, they're like, I've seen a CAT scan that Bluetooth makes your brain swell. This is kind of recognized around the world. So in social enterprises and young people, how do you think that message could translate when it comes to impact, when it comes to solutions, even if it's not carbon, but from a youth perspective? How do you see that impact translating from the young generation going forward into the future to be able to help the elder generation adapt to these things?
Great question. For context, I'm a director for CIC, so I don't actually own it.
Okay, director.
Yeah, so I just help like with the governance, the policy, the strategy. But I've been at that CIC for about 4 years. The founder is a very amazing lady. I think something I like to say to people is there's many people who, in the generation we live in, we are very informed generation, but we don't always use that information accurately or correctly. And I think if we learn, most people are not informed, so they follow the norm, but if once we learn to actually distinguish what's the correct things to do, it will help us with moving forward, especially, I think sometimes, at times, the younger generation may have ideas or solutions, but it's not always been pushed forward. And something I've seen from when I've worked with organizations or whenever CICs work with young people or charities, what's really important is making sure that the young people are actually involved and their voices are being heard. Because if the voice is not being heard, then this is a bit of tokenism. And essentially, it's just a checkbox exercise, but you don't really want that. That's how I would kind of answer that question, if that makes sense.
No, thanks so much. That leads on to Tariq, actually. Yourself, obviously, you work a lot around youth leadership. So what does authentic youth leadership look like to yourself? Especially, you know, like when you were saying actually earlier in the conversation, resources are limited. So if resources are limited, but we need to get things across the line, what do? You know, visibility is limited as well. How do you put young faces on the map to create solutions that can have a global impact or a national or community impact?
Okay, yeah, it's a brilliant question. I'm still not over the fact that Bluetooth makes your head swell. Yeah, when you said that, I said, I'm throwing away my headphones. Good afternoon, everybody. There we go, all right. So yeah, my name is Tariq, and especially when you're talking about youth participation and leadership. So I was fortunate to be at ACSIS last year. I'm a GK ambassador, so for those of you who don't know, Grace Kennedy, they do a Jamaican birthright program where they select young people, one young person from the UK, 2 young people from the US, and 1 from Canada to go for an all expenses paid internship in Jamaica. So I was selected to do the GK ambassador program in 2024.
Well done.
Thank you very much. But I think when we think of like youth participation and meaningful youth participation, I think it goes down to very simple points that we can avoid sometimes. And we don't need resources to know or for a young person to feel like their voice is valued. That when they get into the room and they present their opinion and their decisions at the table, are they being implemented? Are they being listened to? Are you taking their context in consideration? Because I think a lot of miscommunication happens with the older generation where the certain challenges that you went through, and then it's a comparison, it's a direct comparison to the challenges that young people are facing today. It's all relative. It's all relative, and I think it's important to have the empathy and understanding that, you know what, my dad had to go through a section of racism and limited opportunities, but I'm now living in a completely new environment, and if my parents or the adults around me are not flexible to my context, then they're never really going to support me in the way that I need to thrive. So I think it's coming from a place of understanding. So now, briefly, I work for Young Minds, which is a mental health charity. I manage the youth panel. And my thing is, intergenerational conversations, which is an exchange of information. It's not adults just passing down wisdom to young people so they can implement. It's about young people also educating the adults, because young people are closest to where change is. And when we empower their voices, being a poet myself as well, like your voice is very powerful. your lived experience and being able to communicate that is very powerful. And you need to give young people the platform to feel like they are appreciated and their voices are heard. So I don't feel like you need resources to do that. I feel like you need an open mind, and you need people that are going to show encouragement and enthusiasm to having young people in the room.
Okay, I'm expecting a, yeah. I'm expecting a live performance of this later, so stay around. That, to be honest, leads us on, and this, let's turn the screw a bit here, right? In the UK, the African diaspora and the Caribbean diaspora face difficult tasks, right? But they're very different circumstances than those in Africa, right? We've had this many times. We've had partners that have gone, we want to give this to the school you're working at in Africa. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. They don't have electricity. Right? Let's talk about electrification before we talk about other things. So Grace, going straight over to you, because I know you like this. Your nonprofit empowers young African girls through education and mentorship. What does real empowerment look like actually on the ground versus the diaspora say here? That both have challenges, but I think those challenges are very separate. I think being in the UK, we are privileged beyond words compared to, to our families abroad as well.
Thank you so much for that question. It's a valid question. And the truth of the matter is, when people want to support Kakimita mentorship, the first thing they tell me is, oh, I think Grace, you should arrange a Zoom call. I'm like, the schools we support, they do not have electricity. The school, one of the schools we have partnered with, the ICT room is being used to store construction materials. It is being used to store the beans and the maize that will be eaten for lunch. Yeah. So I was there thinking, first of all, we need to get laptops for them or desktops for them before we even start talking about how are we going to empower them with data and the AI skills. Because I had someone who wanted to start the AI conversation with them. I'm like, they have not even seen a computer. So what is AI? You're just confusing their minds more. The other thing is, you need to make sure that on the ground that people are empowered to even get that access to education, because there's one curriculum, there's one exam in Kenya, it's called a pre-tech, and one of the schools we've partnered with, it has 939 girls, and the school knows automatically these girls will fail this course just because they don't have the laptops or the computers, or even the teachers themselves, they don't even know anything about tech. So it really needs to start from ground up, giving them the resources first, and just giving them the opportunity to study, because some girl that we mentor came to us and told us that I am being married off just because I do not have 80 pounds to pay for my entire school year, so I am being married off to this man to go and live with him so that he can cover that 80 pounds. And I was just thinking to myself, this is, if it's supporting this young girl, it's like £8 a month or something like that for them to be in education for the whole year. So there are other pressing matters before we even start talking about mentorship and giving them the skills, like supporting them in their education and giving them the resources that they need. Thank you.
Thank you. And going on to the final question, I completely relate to what Grace is saying. This is the situation in 7 out of our 7 schools currently. We've had students actually leave the school when we've addressed certain things, it's happening, say, at home and things like that. 2 weeks later, they've moved to Nairobi and they're married at 13, right? Things like that. So this happens daily. This is not something out of a make-believe book. It's on the ground. And if we're going to, I'm always looking for solutions, right? We can talk about the bad things, but how do we do solutions? So we've got a lot of corporate kind of talk in the room today, finance, things like that. On a corporate ESG perspective, and Cheryl, this is for you, when we talk about better collaborations with grassroots change makers, whether that's in London with Tariq, whether that's in, Africa with Grace, how can the corporate world basically empower young people in a genuine way? Not that we would just give you something for free, but we will look at the actual barriers to education, the barriers to food, barriers to water, whatever it may be. How can corporates be more authentic in their giving or their empowerment, whatever it may be, in your perspective?
Thank you. I love this question. I'll look at it through the lens of what I do in the working with corporates on their net zero or environmental programs to which they need to buy carbon credits, which are the projects that I mentioned earlier. One example is working with an organization called the Girls' Day School Trust in the UK. They have about 28 private schools around the UK. They're funding or buying carbon credits from a project in Kenya, a water filtration project, funding water filters just outside Nairobi in schools, and speaking to the principal, talking about how do we bridge that gap. One of the key differences she noticed in the pupils, aside from, number of days off sick from polluted water, was the confidence in the students. Now, here's an example of a school or an organization in the UK. They have a target to get to net zero, so that's the channel that they're using to fund a project in Nairobi that has impact beyond the environmental benefits. So there's a real opportunity. People do things because they have to. Right now, there's a real clear requirement for organizations to take action on their footprint. And we have an opportunity back home to develop projects that are transparent and structured to benefit those pupils back home.
Amazing. I just want to say thank you for your insights today. A big round of applause for the panelists. And in closing, I think everyone, the difference here as well, right? Everyone in this room isn't required to be here today. You've chosen to be here today. You've chosen because you care, because there's opportunity, and there's going to be some real life impacts 2026 when we have this conference again. Thank you all for listening. Well done, guys.